Hey folks, my name is Leif. Welcome to my channel called Devs and Dice. Today we're making some ruined buildings, so let's get cracking, shall we? In this one I will show you how I made this ruined building. Watch until the end of the video to find out a small secret of mine which will influence the future of this channel. We're gonna use some basic tools such as some standard foam core, coffee stir sticks, square wooden balsa dowels in 5 and 8 millimeters, some windows like Lego, some paper from old packaging, a 3mm chipboard base, white glue and hot glue, a set square, metal ruler, hobby knives, clippers, tweezers, pen or pencil, and a steel wire brush. I start out sketching with a pencil, but transition quickly to a pen just because it's clearer. Once I have the basic shape in place, I start drawing in my doors and my windows. I use a mini just to make sure that I have the right height of the windows. And this is what it looks like once I have all of the plans drawn out. And those filled in are of course the doors and the windows. I cut out these shapes using a sharp hobby knife. The sharper the blade, the better. That will save you some tearing in the foam core. But luckily this is a ruined building, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Here is the magic of this process. I am essentially just cutting through the first layer of the foam core, effectively using the paper on the backside as a hinge. Once I've cut out the shape, I glue it down with some hot glue onto the base. Starting with this side makes it a heck of a lot easier to glue them down one by one. Here I'm just testing to see that I have some space for a miniature to potentially take cover. It might be the game designer in me speaking, but I really suggest that you focus on the design aspect of any building or terrain piece you're making. Think about shooting lines, where you have choke points, where you might have different elevated positions. All of these things brings depth and tactic to the tabletop, which I like because let's face it, if you're using terrain on the tabletop, chances are that your game is quite tactical already. Once we have the building up, it's time to decorate it with some of that 8mm timber. I used the steel wire brush to get some nice wooden texture, cut it to shape, and simply glue it in with some hot glue. It's up to you, of course, but what I like to do is to have the same dimensions of timber cover all of the exterior framework of a building. But there are also, of course, exceptions to the rule. Here you can see that I went for the 5mm for some of the bracers between the two beams, and the same thing with the actual roof in the middle. At this point, it's a good idea to glue in those windows. Now, I used Lego windows, so I of course cut off the studs and then I just attached them with white glue. This build is very coffee stir sticks heavy. As you can see, I am using the coffee stir sticks as exterior timber on this house, and I cut them to shape using my clippers most of the time. Using a wet brush is an excellent way of getting rid of those white glue residues, and take this chance to really express yourself with this building and be decorative with the timber. The next step is really to start thinking about all of the floors, and for this I'm using that 5mm balsa wood, which I cut to length and glue in using some white glue. Each elevated floor gets about 2 cross beams to support a floor. And the floorboards, you guessed it, made out of coffee stir sticks. I rip these to appropriate lengths and then I just glue them in with white glue. And while you're watching this floorboard montage extravaganza, I want to thank all of my amazing patrons for their support, especially my champion and legend level patrons. Andreas Winberg, Erik Ortman, 4VXP, Madners, Magnus Solberg, Rosengraveyard, Leander, and Niklas Swedenlind. Thank you everyone, you are the best. And after a winter with lots of sickness and health scares, you have been the guiding light in the dark. So thank you. Starting with the basic framework for the roof, this I just glue in with some white glue and coffee stir sticks. Now, one little small detail here which I like is these roofs are of course ruined, so I just snap off some smaller pieces and glue them higher up so it looks like the roof might have collapsed from the other side. Also important, make sure that you remove all of those white glue residues. I think it also helps the white glue to actually seep into the wood. Some decorative ends of wooden supports are put up front. And here I'm really trying to just open up pathways, again looking at the gameplay factor. But of course, we need to look at the visuals, so I added some broken timber here and there. Here is a good example of what I mean about looking at the gameplay aspects. These holes in my fantasy have been made by roaming warbands in Mordheim. This will function both as an elevated position to shoot from, but also as an entryway for a jerry-rigged bridge. Some packaging will make excellent shingles, and you can see I'm using a weird scissors, and I think I got that in the scrapbooking section of my local craft store. Now, as per usual, I like to bend my shingles a little bit just so it looks like the wood has actually gotten some moisture and started to warp. Now, looking at our build, it's starting to look really good, but at this point I really wanted to care more about the actual texture, which is very important. Here I'm using some sand texture gel, which I tested out and I found that it really does a good job of giving some well-needed texture to that foam core surface. I cover every piece of wall with this texture, and if I get some on the timber, I simply wipe it away with a wet Q-tip. Now, there are a multitude of different pastes with texture. You can even go as cheap as using PVA glue and some sand. And speaking of the devil, I'm gonna use some scenery sand from the army painter to flock the base. This will give it a very nice sort of ramshackle, ruined feeling, but it will also double down as the earth layer, if you will. Now, I tend to not go overly crazy with the scenery sand here, partly because, well, I want to be economical, but also because I like it in clusters here and there, and I don't want to obfuscate all of the nice details I've already have with all of the timbers. A pro tip is also to do this over a large sheet of paper, because then you can gather all of the excess back into the tub. I want to share a little bit what transpired in the time leading up to this project. You see, when I was thinking about making buildings for Mordheim, I sort of lost faith in my abilities as a crafter. This all stemmed from the fact that these Mordheim buildings need to look good on the outside as well as the inside. Most of my buildings, I really don't do much with the interior walls. This meant that I had really never done so-called Tudor-style houses with a nice interior. Now, everyone has their own process of doubt, and mine usually begins with a crushing feeling of imposter syndrome, but luckily at some point I try to use that incompetence and ignorance like a weapon. I admit to myself that I don't know anything about these buildings. I don't even know what they're called. With this humble mindset, I open myself up for information, which makes the research stage so much more easier for me mentally. I scoured the internet and I managed to find one good video from Shadversity where he goes through the different reasonings behind the designs and also what they're called, wattle and daub houses. This, among other things, helped me to really wrap my head around the construction, but also it informed my choice of painting. In my research, I also found this excellent blog, which really influenced this build, weirdstonesandtacklezones.com. Check it out. So with that, I think it's time to crack on with the painting. I start the painting process by priming this in black. Here I'm using the airbrush just because it's winter painter here and it is so much more convenient. Once primed, I come in with some white ink to help me define the highlights, midtones and shadows. In my investigations, I found out that the walls are pretty much made of mud, straw and poop, flanked by wooden timbers. The common denominator is brown, so I sprayed burnt umber ink on the entire thing, which created a nice base for me when I came in with some light brown and beige craft paints. Since we're actually trying to emulate paint, you don't have to be that precise, which I really leaned into by stippling in first the base color and then a brighter version in the middle where light would hit. Historically speaking, wattle and daub houses were usually painted white, but I wanted mine to look like a splendid city in the old world that got ruined. So the exterior walls got some color to them. Once the layers of paint had dried, I came in and dry brushed everything with an off-white color. This will help with the highlights, but it also has an added benefit of making the wood look weathered and old. In the running up to this build, I made some posters and printed them out. I knew I wanted each building to have quite a lot of flavor and a little bit of humor even. Army Painter's strong tone is used to create nice weathering streaks, but also to create some nice details on these posters. Here you can see I'm depositing quite a lot, and then I just sort of blow it from the side and it creates these nice, disgusting stains on the paper. Some military shader is used at the bottom and where we want to give a hint of vegetation or moss. I hadn't decided what to do with the roof, but I decided to paint it in a nice teal color, which I then dry brushed with a brighter color. Now here comes the most scary moment in this entire build. In all honesty, it looks amazing, but I knew I wanted some scribbles and graffiti. This would infuse this terrain piece with plenty of story and character, and like I mentioned before, sometimes even humor. Leading up to this, I of course practiced on paper, but it was scary nonetheless. The white graffiti got dulled down by a little bit of strong tone, and of course I needed to also add some blood splatter here and there. Here I really just try to think about places where, people might have died. At this point I remembered to prime the windows. I actually put the windows in after they were primed because I knew that black is quite a good color and I can easily come in and almost overbrush them with a silver metallic color. Some finalizing touches was added by using some pigments in a burnt umber persuasion just to add a little bit of dustiness to the piece. Okay, let's have a look at the final result, and I will also tell you a little bit about my plans. Now I'm really happy about this, and I'm happy to return to Mordheim. For me, it always felt like Mordheim was kind of the one that got away, and I've decided to do something about it. I actually have now built a total of 10 buildings, and my plan in the near future is to actually build a Mordheim board. This does not in any shape or form mean that I will not do D&D content. Thankfully, most of my crafts can be translated into a multitude of different games. So thank you so much for watching, and if you'd like to continue watching my videos, then YouTube suggests that you should be watching this for your next viewing pleasure. Stay safe, good folks, and I will see you in the next video.